Chris Irvin, welcome back to the Keto Camp podcast, my friend.
How's it going, Ben?
It's going outstanding, brother. It's good to have you back on the show. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, I'm glad to be back on here. I know trying to think the last time we linked up was probably KetoCon last year is probably the last time we had a chance to chat.
That was the last time we had a chance to chat and the first time that we've actually met each other in person.
That's true. You're right. Actually, it's so funny that I always forget that because we had been like connecting online and with podcasting for a couple of years before that like I didn't even realize until you said it that day that it was like, yeah, I guess we've never actually met in person.
Yeah, exactly. You're so right. It's so weird because we live in this world where it's so easy to connect with people, Squadcast, Zoom, etc., all this technology, but most of the time we haven't really met in person. So it was cool to hang out with you at KetoCon last year. Are you going back this year?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm always looking for an excuse to go back to Austin. I lived there for about a year and a half right after my wife and I got married. So still have like a lot of friends out there, and anytime there's an excuse to go out there, I usually do. So I'm pretty excited for this year as well. Are you going?
Yeah, I'll be there as well. It's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be even bigger than last time. And I remember we first met at Brian Sanders' event at his compound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said you lived like a couple blocks right from that compound.
Yeah. It was just like you could see like the apartment that I had lived in from his place, and I'm really excited to go back to his compound too, because when we had that party that night, it was like he had just moved in there very shortly before it, and he was sharing the vision for what he was turning it into. And I haven't checked in with him to see how far it's come along, but like it really sounded like that place was going to be sweet. So I'm excited to check that back out when I go.
Yeah, I remember it was a beautiful spot, and now it's a
Yeah.
year later or so. So yeah, I think he'll probably do something else. We got to check in with him to see if
Yeah.
he's going to do another event. Otherwise, we'll convince him to do one.
I was going to say, if not, he's going to have us over.
Exactly. So KetoCon, by the way, for those watching and listening, it's taking place the third week of April 2023 in Austin, Texas. KetoCon.org. It's an awesome event. My coupon code is KetoCamp to get $50 off your ticket price. I'll be there hanging out all weekend. Chris will be there as well. And Chris and I are both taller than you would expect. So when you see this in person, we're going to be taller. I'm sure you get that all the time.
Yeah.
You're taller than I thought. I get the same thing.
I know. It's always great. Like, especially, I feel like at those events too, because, when you go out on like the expo floor and it gets really packed, it's like really hard to, navigate and like see everybody. But being a little bit taller than everybody, you can like find everybody that you're looking for and you want to talk with. It's a nice little perk for busy crowds.
It is. It's also when I used to go to concerts. I used to go to a lot of concerts when I was younger. Great perk for being at a concert because it doesn't matter if somebody's in front of you.
Yes.
You're going to be taller than them and you'll be able to see the stage. How tall are you, Chris?
I'm 6'3". Yeah, 6'3".
Yeah, so you're actually taller than me. I'm 6'2" and a half. You got me by a half inch.
Half inch. Well, I always wonder. I haven't been measured since basketball, and I think actually when I was in college they had marked me at like 6'4", but you know how it is with basketball. They're always trying to give you an extra inch on the program type of thing. So who knows? I might be a little closer to 6'2". You put the basketball shoes on, you get a little tippy toes. They give you a couple inches.
Speaking of basketball, maybe we should plan something to play some basketball in Austin, dude. I know that you still play like on a weekly basis, right?
Yeah, I still play 2 to 3 times a week. And Austin actually has a really good basketball community. I was pretty pumped about that when I moved out there. I had a friend out here in Tampa who lived out there, and he connected me with some folks at like the YMCA out there. And then through the YMCA, I got plugged into a couple different like leagues that I played in. And I mean, I don't know, maybe I just didn't think of Austin as being a basketball city, but it just like really good competition, a lot of places to play. Like you can pretty much always find a run out there. So we'll definitely have to do that when we're out there. I usually go back whenever I'm in town. I usually go back to the YMCA that's like right there off of Lamar. Because that's where I have some old buddies that play. So I usually try to. It's just the only problem is it's pretty early. It's about a 5:30 or 6 a.m. run. So you gotta get up a little.
That's pretty. I don't know if I'm gonna do that. But maybe we could find an outdoor court and play some ball there. That'll be awesome. I also play every Sunday. So yesterday was Sunday. I'm super sore. I've been playing with in an outdoor park here in Miami Beach. I've been playing with Misha Hyman. Do you know who Misha Hyman is?
I don't know.
He's Mark Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman's son.
Okay, no, I don't know, but I do know Dr. Mark Hyman though.
Yeah, Dr. Mark Hyman is pretty well known. So his son lives here in Miami part time. He's a keto chef. He's a great guy. I love him, and he's awesome. So we've been playing every Sunday with a couple of buddies of mine, and we like to talk smack to each other. So far the series, I'm leading him 7-2. So I beat him 7 times. He's beat me twice, but he's really good. And man, it takes a toll on my body sometimes. Like today, I'm super sore, but I love it. It's so
Yeah.
cool to find like a sport or an exercise that doesn't feel like exercise. You get all like the oxytocin and dopamine benefits. So that's so many benefits to playing a sport that you really love to play.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people like, with exercise, I think everybody thinks that it has to be punishment, but it's like finding the things like that that you enjoy, because like I play, like I said, about 3 times a week, and I get anywhere between. I've measured it out on my Apple Watch where I'll get anywhere between like, 5 to 6 miles of work in on the court. And that's, kind of in like a high intensity style of training. And it's like, if I had to go run 7 miles, like no chance. Like I hate it. Like I don't enjoy running. And also like, if I'm out for a run, I'll push it for as long as I can, but I'm a little bit more likely to stop when I get tired versus like when you have competition and you're playing against somebody, there's just like, you push yourself to like an extra point. So like for me, I feel like it's been really, a lot of times as an athlete, like when you get done playing your sport and you stop playing, it becomes really easy to get out of shape and, pack on some weight and, just lose that cardio piece. But I feel like that's been a really important thing for me staying in shape, especially since becoming a dad where, maybe it's hard to get in the gym as frequently as I was before. Getting up and playing basketball has been something that allows me to, maintain some sort of physique. So it's, I think it's important for people to find that competitive source of exercise that, pushes them and they enjoy.
Yeah, and there's so many options out there. I mean,
Yeah.
the one that's the most popular right now is pickleball. It's like the fastest growing sport. Have you played it yet?
I have, yeah. So like, during COVID, I feel like just like everybody else, it got big because outdoor sport, people are looking for things to do. And my wife got into it and we started playing. And actually out here in St. Pete, they have a lot of really nice pickleball courts. And they were already here. Like this is kind of like an older, or at least it used to be like an older community. So I don't know if that's why. But then, so they already had like a few, but I'm sure just like everywhere else, they started putting more in. So we play quite a bit. But the thing I love most about pickleball is that, other sports like basketball, like if you're like us and you're taller, like, the physicalness of it can go a long way. Whereas like in pickleball, it doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how strong you are. Like I remember the first time I played, it was like my wife and her friend against like me and her friend's husband, and he's tall like me and they're both like really short petite girls, and they kicked our butts. Like we got completely blown out of the water by them. So it's like it's a true like skill based game, which I think is awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. I have yet to play, but I have so many friends that play. Miami also is a big pickleball spot.
I bet.
Also
yeah.
big basketball scene here too. There's a lot of like basketball clubs here. Very popular sport here in Miami. And yeah, to your point, if I'm running, it's definitely a different experience than if I'm playing basketball. And yesterday I played basketball like for two hours actually outside. It was a nice day, but I got over 13,000 steps in 2 hours, and it didn't feel like it, right? It was just playing basketball, a sport that I love and enjoying and playing. So yeah, find a sport, find something that you resonate with. There's so many sports available. There's what is it called? The Frisbee sport. What's the name of it?
Well, which
Ultimate
one? There's
Frisbee?
like Ultimate Frisbee. Yeah.
I know Mark Sisson plays that down here in South Beach. There's, so many things you can do. So that's a good way to start the conversation.
Totally.
I wonder who would win between me and you, Chris.
Well, maybe we'll have to like live stream us playing one-on-one, and we'll go into I won't let you see my game. You don't let me see your game. It'll be a true raw experience, and we'll see what happens.
I think I'm pretty good in basketball. I imagine you're pretty good because you played, in high school, right?
Yeah, I played in college too, but I played small college. So I went to a really small school in South Central Illinois. And yeah, I mean, basketball, like it was kind of my first true passion in life. Like I have all these, it's like I have these stories from my mom about, trying to teach me how to ride a bike, and they'd have to like hide my basketball because I just wouldn't want to do anything else. It's kind of been, and I think it was like also the first thing that taught me hard work, which is something that kind of like, transcended into other areas of my life. It was like, I wasn't, growing up, I wasn't like the most skilled early on, and I didn't get big until later. I was actually pretty small until like halfway through high school. So it was like the first thing that I got to experience, like, oh, if you actually work hard at something, you can get good at it. Even if you're maybe not the most like physically gifted or something like that. So like, I'm always grateful to it for that, because I think it gave me these like tools and this mindset that has carried over into these other areas of life.
That's a great lesson. Yeah. Absolutely. So for those who are not familiar with Chris, I don't know how that could be because he's the ketologist. Everybody knows who Chris is. Chris was on the Keto Camp podcast before, episode 219. We discussed carnivore and
Yeah.
the healing benefits of carnivore. And we both agree that carnivore is still to this day an incredible tool if used correctly. I want to transition today's conversation to more on keto. And here's where I want to start. Is keto dead? Meaning we see a lot of people in our space who used to love keto and now they're saying, I stopped doing keto. Keto has these negative effects, and there's like a lot of keto bashing going on to these days. So is
Yeah.
keto dead, Chris?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I don't think it is. And, I also get to come at this from a little bit of a marketing angle. And one of the things that you see, and it's been pretty cyclical for the last 4 or 5 years, is that, every January, on the like Google Trends, keto and ketogenic diet go to 100, like they're completely maxed out. And then, they trickle down, it trickles down over the course of the year. A little bit of a spike in the summertime or before summer, and then kind of trickles down until, the next January where it goes up again. And I think that the reason why is just because it's such a solid diet for weight loss. And that, I don't think there's like a lot. I think the conversation around keto has shifted more towards using keto as a tool, using it to achieve like a certain goal, and then, transitioning to, whether it's a low carb diet or, doing some intermittent fasting or whatever it is, carb conscious, whatever. So I think that a lot of people are kind of using it as a, 30 to 60 day tool to, maybe it's lose weight, improve their blood sugar, like the type of goals that people tend to have at the beginning of the year. So I don't think it's dead because we're still seeing that. But I think one of the things that gives it a perception of being dead is that a lot of, influencers and people who have been so big about keto over the last few years, I think have started to notice that the popularity is not what it once was. In 2018, the popularity was high, but also the competition was lower. So people who were, growing social media accounts, or maybe they had blogs, or, these companies that have ketogenic diet food products and stuff like that, because of the, the high search volume for it, and the, a lot of people looking for it, and the low competition, a lot of these companies and influencers were leaning into it. And now I think they're starting to see that it's kind of watered down. Like there's a lot of people talking about it. I think there's also the fact that like keto, it's like everybody kind of knows something about keto now. So when people hear the term keto, like they have a preconceived notion. It's either good or bad typically, right? Like not many people are following, falling in the moderate middle on that. So I think what's happening is a lot of influencers who have traditionally been so big on keto are trying to kind of rebrand themselves as, non-keto, or, whether it's metabolic health focused or, something else. And it kind of gives this perception that it's dead. But, it's funny, like a couple of years ago, or probably about a year ago now, I did like a poll on Instagram where I asked people like, do you want to see more keto content, or do you want to see, and I listed like some other things, and, it was like 97% of the responders were like, I want to see more keto stuff. So, I don't know that it's growing the same way that it once was, but I still think it has a really solid base. And, I hope it doesn't disappear, because it's one of those things where, we know that it's a great tool. And I actually think that the way that we've kind of evolved our thinking about it, about using it more as a tool instead of this like, all in or all out type of diet, I think is actually the right way to look at it. So I hope that people continue to embrace it that way, because it can provide so many benefits.
Hey, I want to just interrupt the video you're watching real quick to share something with you. As somebody who's been in the keto space for 14 years, I've taken thousands and thousands of people through a keto protocol. I've seen the number one problem and struggle people have on keto being this electrolyte dumping process. Allow me to explain real quick. When you lower your carbohydrates and lower insulin, you're going to release excess water weight, which is terrific because you're going to look lighter, less puffy, and feel lighter. The problem is this: the kidneys also release excess electrolytes, and you go through this sort of diuresis process leading to symptoms on keto. And what is the solution? Keeping your electrolytes up. And when I talk about electrolytes, there are good ones out there. Then there are optimal, incredible products. The one that I use is from Upgraded Charge. One of the reasons why I love this product is that it has a unique proprietary blend of nanoparticles that have the ability to get into your cells, which is for maximum absorption. It contains magnesium, zinc, sodium, and potassium, and it tastes pretty good. Kind of tastes like a non-alcoholic margarita, and the flavor comes from the lemon peel. Simply use this by adding it to your water or sparkling water and get your electrolytes up. Replenish them. This is key to feeling incredible on keto. Upgraded Formulas has hooked you all up with a sweet deal to get their Upgraded Charge or any of their amazing products at 15% off. All you need to do is head over to upgradedformulas.com and use the coupon code KETOCAMP at checkout and get 15% off your entire order. I will drop a link for you with the coupon code in the notes down below. All right, let's get back to this video. So many benefits, and we'll get into a few of them. But yeah, you're right. You know, I see a lot of keto influencers over the last few years who are potentially not doing keto anymore. Like Paul Saladino is one of them. I know Thomas DeLauer has said some things as well. And I've always been about when I first started Keto Camp, my approach was keto is great. It's an incredible metabolic process. So it's not going away because it's not really a diet. It's a metabolic process.
Right.
But I think there should be a conversation around the metabolic flexibility part and not just being dogma, right? You just said it, right? So we use it as one tool of many tools out there. And that's what I teach at Keto Camp. We know we use it as a tool. We want to be really efficient fat burners when we need to be, really efficient glucose, sugar burners when we need to be. And that's not going to go away. But to your point, the popularity of a keto diet might be trending down, but the fact that it could help you achieve this metabolic flexibility, I think that's always going to be there because it always has been. There's nothing new about keto.
Yeah, totally. And I think like that's been my biggest realization. Like, you know, when I first started, you know, I was coming from working in a lab where we were doing a lot of keto focused studies, and, you know, I was very new to it. I was very hot on it. And I definitely was of the mindset that, like, you know, most people should be on keto. It's a great diet. When you start it, you should follow it. Like, I was always kind of, you know, this narrative of like, the longer you follow it, the more you start to experience these more robust benefits and this deeper level of like keto adaptation. And then, you know, continuing to like work with different populations of people and hearing anecdotes and reading the research, you know, I think what I've kind of adjusted my thinking to now is that I think you know, like you said, keto is a powerful metabolic process, and being able to get into ketosis easily, I think, is a great sign of proper metabolic health. So, and then, you know, being able to be in that state of metabolic health and then utilizing ketosis when it makes sense. So, you know, if you want to utilize, like, say you want to lose some pounds, but you want to feel good while you do it, like, keto is a great way to do that. Like, you know, having ketones present during the weight loss process, I think, is superior to not. You know, I think you tend to feel better. You tend to have more energy, you know, a little bit more satiety, things like that. Maybe if you're trying to, you know, increase your brain function in the morning, you use intermittent fasting as a strategy to increase your ketone levels because you're at a metabolic state that allows you to do that very easily. Like, that's how I think it should be used. I don't think that, you know, we don't need to be in ketosis 24/7, 365. I think we just need to be able to easily get there is the goal. I mean, you know, everybody talks about the ancestral component of it. And that really is, you know, I'm not so married to the idea that we should be living the exact same way that our ancestors did, or, you know, only, you know, doing the things that they did. But the fact is that that's something they were always able to do, just by way of not being able to overeat, for one, and not being able to really overeat carbs, for sure, because, you know, the sources were so limited that they were always able to transition into the state of ketosis. And I think when you kind of know the metabolic processes and all the things that happen with ketosis, you realize that, like, cycling in and out of it periodically throughout the year is going to provide a ton of benefits, you know, from both short-term and long-term benefits. So that's kind of been the way that I've reframed my thinking around it. And, you know, I think that's kind of where the conversation is going more now too.
Yeah. And I'm happy to see that. And that's exactly the way I teach it, right? It's the premise behind keto flexing. Let's get you fat adapted, keto adapted, and then we could flex out and go back into ketosis. And like you said, that's a good barometer of how healthy your metabolism is.
Yeah.
How soon can you enter ketosis? How do you feel, etc. And the way that I view ketosis is as a scarcity / survival kind of mechanism, because that's what happened with our ancestors. And to your point, we shouldn't do everything our ancestors did, but they were forced into times of famine, or it was the winter and there was just protein and fat. There was no carbohydrates. So by necessity, their body, their metabolism had to have the ability to break down fat, and that liver needed to produce ketones. Otherwise, their brain would drop in glucose and they wouldn't be able to focus. They wouldn't be able to hunt and kill. So it signals to your body that you are going through a stressor, but the wonderful benefits that occur from this perceived stressor is incredible. What it does to strengthen the mitochondria and create more mitochondria and more energy. But it comes to a point where the benefits could start to slow down and then decrease, right? That hormetic curve will start to drop. So then the question is, okay, then how long should I do keto? How often should I flex in and out? And what would be your answer to that question?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, and I think it kind of goes back to I was back on my old university. I went to University of Tampa for grad school, and I was talking with one of my nutrition professors, and we were talking about how everybody's really dogmatic with nutrition, and one of the things I kind of realized in that conversation was that I feel like a good approach for looking at any sort of diet is to look at like what's the end goal that we're trying to get to, and using those markers and then looking at what are the different ways that you can improve those markers. So like for me, I think that metabolic health is very important. I think it's at the central of our health in general. I think that, most chronic diseases and just chronic health complications are rooted in metabolic dysfunction. So I think that that's really what we want to focus on. So, looking at important metabolic health markers, we're talking blood sugar, A1C, fasting insulin, triglycerides, HDL to triglyceride ratio, all of these different markers, even HSCRP, I think is really important for it. Like, I think the goal is to look at those markers and try to get them into a range that is healthy, and then trying to stay there. So, I think that if you're coming from a position of, very poor metabolic health, keto is a great way to get there. So, what I would recommend to people, like, I don't think you can give a straight up answer of like, hey, this is how long it will take for you to improve that. But I think that if you follow keto for say 30 days and then you go get your blood work done and you see that, maybe you've made some improvements, towards improving those markers, but you're not quite there yet. Maybe you cycle out for, a brief period of time. You kind of maintain a low carb diet. There's actually great research on, cycling out of keto into low carb and then back into keto. I think something like that could be beneficial. Or maybe if you're still feeling good, because as much as we talk about that hormetic curve, I think that when you surpass that curve, I think you notice it. Like, you feel lack of energy, you're not getting very good sleep, maybe you have like limited strength in the gym, maybe your mood's dipping. Like, if you're starting to experience those things, then that's a sign that you probably need to dip out of ketosis. But if you're still feeling great, then I say you kind of keep pushing it until you start getting those markers where they need to be. And that's when I think it's time to fall into a more of a maintenance phase, or flex out, as you kind of call it, and kind of stay in this like low carb, carb conscious state that allows you to maintain those health markers. So, I've seen pretty incredible improvements from, 30 days to 60 days of people being able to, get their A1C from pre-diabetic range to normal, being able to get their fasting glucose, from, again, pre-diabetic to normal. So, that's kind of the way that I look at it, is that, we should be using, I don't think we should just be using a goal weight, or we should be using some arbitrary, like, oh, I'm on a 30-day diet type of thing. Like, I think we should be looking at the health markers that we're trying to improve, and then monitoring those and keeping with it until we get to where we want to be.
Well said. Yeah. So those lab markers are very important. A1C, fasting insulin, fasting glucose, postprandial glucose, HSCRP, triglycerides, HDL, getting the ratios.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great idea, but also how you feel, to Chris's point, like if you notice you're just not feeling as good, might be time to switch things up. And you're right. The majority of the American adult population, they really need keto. That study in 2018 from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, pointed that out, that 88% of American adults are unhealthy. They are essentially in a keto deficiency. They're keto deficient. So we got to get them into ketosis. Those individuals might need to stay in ketosis a little bit longer versus somebody who's somewhat healthy, does keto for 30 days or 40 days. They could start flexing in and out much sooner, but it's going to be so different depending on the person. Like when we think about Paul Saladino, who I totally respect. I think he's a really brilliant guy. I've interviewed him twice, but he teaches what he does, which is eating 200 to 300 grams of carbs from fruit every day, and doing a little bit of some intermittent fasting. And that will work for somebody who's metabolically healthy. But if somebody's obese and who has insulin resistance, consuming 200 to 300 grams of carbs per day even from quality fruit, just not going to get them to where they want to get to.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's like, when you hear all this pushback towards keto or even, push for keto, it's like nobody's really looking at the individual, and that's what matters. When you see, like, I'll get a lot of people, if I post something about keto, they'll say, like, oh, you're trying to say that like fruit's unhealthy. It's like, well, no, but if you're insulin resistant, having a lot of it probably doesn't make much sense. Right. I mean, the way that I look at it is that, if your body is utilizing carbohydrates well, then consuming them is fine, especially whole food ones, right? Like, I don't think we're getting a lot of benefits from eating processed carbohydrates, but, if your body uses them well, like for me, I'll use fruit before I play basketball in the morning. Like I did
Me too.
playing, yeah.
Yep.
It's like I did basketball doing keto for a while and it was okay. But then I kind of noticed that it wasn't really giving me everything I needed. So I started incorporating, like a banana and some berries before. I'll actually usually do some exogenous ketones too and combine them.
Hmm.
And I find that works really well. So, but that's only because I'm metabolically flexible, right? Like when I consume those, my insulin system is working well and I'm actually putting those to good use. I worked with a couple of years ago, I worked a NFL combine camp. It was prepping these guys for the NFL combine so that they would, be able to perform well and, increase their draft status. And, athletes traditionally are always so big on carbohydrate consumption, right? Like you got to consume carbs, carb loading. And, some of our like offensive linemen, for instance, a lot of them needed to lose weight. Like they needed to be in a certain weight range for them to be able to get drafted. Like they wanted to see them in this certain number. And so a lot of them, their traditional dietitians have been talking to them was, trying to just have them restrict calories, but keep carbs high. And I kind of told them, I was like, I get where you're coming from, that carbs can be an ergogenic aid, but like, let's look at your blood work. If you're insulin resistant, then it doesn't matter. You're not getting the ergogenic aid from these carbs because they're just not able to provide you the benefit that they should be. So like, if we're going to consume these things, especially 200 to 300 grams of it a day, like we have to make sure that our body is primed to be able to use them. And to your point, that study out of North Carolina says that 88% of us aren't. So that doesn't mean that it's a forever thing. It doesn't mean that we'll never be able to use those carbs, but it does mean that we need to do something to improve our ability to use them if we're going to consume them. And that's where I think keto is so strong.
So strong. And that study came out before COVID. It probably is much higher because of what happened in the last 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a conversation around this fat adaptation. Those people, 88% that are metabolically unhealthy, they're what we call sugar burners. They're primarily using sugar for energy. They're well equipped and really well at burning sugar, but the body has forgotten how to utilize the other pathway, which is this ketogenic energy system that is very important to get into. So what is the difference though? What would be your definition of explaining? How would you explain the difference between somebody who's fat adapted? What does that mean to you versus somebody who's now ketone adapted?
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of times we don't make a distinction between the two. I think that like, especially over the last couple of years, keto adaptation and fat adaptation have been used interchangeably. But I think if you look at the body and how it, like the metabolic processes in the body, you see that there's actually a pretty drastic difference between the two. So, I think being fat adapted is being in a state of, at baseline, lower blood sugar, lower insulin. I think when you're in a state of low blood sugar, low insulin, you're better able to burn fat. And if we're burning fat, we're releasing stored fatty acids from our fat cells into our bloodstream. Our cells are taking them and using them for energy. That to me is fat adapted. Keto adapted is a little bit different because it's involving ketones as the energy source instead of fat. And, ketones they're going to get access to our cells through a different mechanism. They're going to be using these MCT transporters. And what we see when we look at the research is that, if we haven't been in ketosis, which, as you pointed out, for most of us on the standard American diet, we're not operating in any sort of ketosis throughout our day to day. We're consuming carbs all throughout the day, high meal frequency, not very big gaps between our meals. So if you haven't been in ketosis very much, then these transporters, they're not as active. And, you can actually be producing ketones, but there can be a lag between when you're producing these ketones and when your cells are actually utilizing them. So for me, becoming keto adapted is you've become efficient at actually using those ketones, which it can be a difficult thing to measure. And I don't think that we have the most clear answer on this, but what I tend to look at is that I actually think, and it's maybe counterintuitive, that when your blood ketone levels, or, if you're using urine, it's not the most accurate, but in this case, it can help a little bit. But if you're testing your blood ketones and you've been following keto for a while and you start, you might see like a big spike at the beginning where your ketones are very high. But when you talk to people over time, they start to notice that those start to taper off. Exactly. Yeah. And to me, that's a sign of being keto adapted because it doesn't make sense. Your body doesn't like to produce excess. It's not efficient for the body. The body likes to, produce what it needs. It doesn't want to have to necessarily work harder to make something that you're not going to use. So I think that when your blood ketones start to become a little bit more normalized, maybe it's different for everybody, but that could be between 0.3 to 1.0. that's where I think you're showing that you might be keto adapted, because you're utilizing more of what you're actually producing. If there's less in the bloodstream, then, we would think theoretically that means that you're using more of them. So that's the difference to me, is that it's not just that we're producing them, it's that we're actually using them.
It's a really important point, and you're so right. A lot of people think I need to get more ketones. I need to test my blood glucose with whatever, and I need to make sure my ketones are 3.0, 4.0. And in the beginning, you might see higher ketones because your cells are not really using it, to Chris's point. But as you get more keto adapted, and now the mitochondria are now really getting good at using ketones as an energy substrate, the blood ketone readings are going to be much lower. And that's actually a good thing. I have a lot of my students who are like, oh, what happened to me? I was getting 3.2, 3.8.
Yeah.
Now I'm 4 weeks into it. I'm getting like 1.8. I'm like, that's a good thing. Your body and your brain is actually using it. Yes. But you're right. There's no way to really test if somebody's keto adapted unless they go into a lab and do some really extensive testing. But I always tell people what you just said, to look at those ketones, but also typically when somebody gets keto adapted, they notice the brain benefits, right? Because we know the most of the mitochondria is in the brain. So that's what's going to really utilize a lot of the ketones. And they notice, wow, I just feel like another level of like clarity, and my brain fog has gone away. That's typically a sign of somebody getting keto adapted.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's some great work by Dr. Stephen Cunnane that's looked at, energy metabolism in the brain and throughout the body. He talks about how if the rest of our body will preserve ketones for the brain. Like the brain is, they're kind of the best users of ketones. The brain also is not very good at using fat for energy. So in a state of low glucose, the body kind of from a survival mechanism has preserved these ketones for the brain, because your muscles can use these other energy sources. And in a pinch, your muscles could even burn protein if they needed to. So, it really makes sense for them to save these ketones for the brain. So that is the biggest thing. Like if you are feeling the cognitive boost from keto, you're feeling the mood boost from it, that's a good sign that you're keto adapted. Because, if you weren't, and you're not consuming glucose, and you're probably in a calorie deficit, because I do think most times on keto, we just inherently end up in a calorie deficit. Well, maybe not as much anymore with some of the, a lot of the hyper palatable keto friendly foods that have come on the market.
That's true.
But typically, if you're doing a whole food keto diet, you end up in that calorie deficit. If you weren't producing ketones and using them in the brain, you would know, because you would feel like crap. Your energy would be low, your mood would be poor. Your brain wouldn't be producing the right neurotransmitters to help you operate at a high level and feel good while you're doing it. So I think that is better than any blood test on that side of things, is the feel of it, because you can't fake the feel. You'll know if you're not.
Yeah, you'll know. That's why I call it the great land of ketosis, because it feels like a superpower. It really does, especially if you're somebody like an entrepreneur who needs to be on top of their game, or a mom or a dad who needs to be there and like present with their children. You're going to notice that difference right there. I've seen it typically on average, and it's going to be different for everybody, but with my Keto Camp Academy students, I've taken thousands of people through these protocols. I've seen on average between the 8 to 12 week mark that they start to notice those benefits, meaning like keto adaptation. That's what I've seen. Would you think, or what do you think about that estimation, the 8 to 12 weeks of that keto adaptation for the average person?
Yeah, for sure. I do think, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I do think that there's kind of different phases of it. So, I think that a lot of times after a couple of weeks, people will start to experience some level of keto adaptation. And some of it does depend on where you're coming from. So, if you're coming from a state of really poor metabolic health, really high fasting insulin, really high A1C, it might take a little bit longer for you to experience those benefits. You have, a little bit bigger of a hole that you have to dig out of. But I think for most people around like the 2 to 3 week mark, you'll start to experience, some pretty noticeable, robust improvements. But and the problem is most people tend to fall off after, that 4 week mark, because if you're trying to lose 20 pounds, which I always feel like is a common amount of weight people want to lose, you can do that in 30 days on keto. So a lot of people will hit like a weight loss goal and then they'll kind of fall off of it. But the people who stick through it, I think, tend to notice that at 6 weeks, wow, I'm actually experiencing like a new level of benefit. Like that cognitive boost is a little bit more robust now. I'm actually noticing changes in my sleep now. My stress is a little bit different than it was before. And then, as you continue going, I think, you get into that 8 to 12 week mark. And I think that's a good number too, because it does seem like it probably peaks around that time. I think when you get to about 8 to 12 weeks, you're probably not going to experience, in terms of the way that you feel and the level of keto adaptation, I don't think you're going to push it much further than that. I think you're kind of reaching like the pinnacle at that point. But also there's so many other reasons for it too. Outside of just the ketones, we're also talking 12 weeks of you not eating sugar anymore. 12 weeks of you're not drinking soda, you're not eating bread. Hopefully you're also cutting out some seed oils along the way. So, I think there's also a little bit of that going on, that the longer you're following, you're in the state of ketosis, that's the longer that you're staying away from a lot of the other harms. Keto is a lot about what you put in your body in the presence of ketones, but it's also a lot about what you're not putting in your body too. So I think that's playing a role as well.
Hey, I want to just briefly interrupt the video you're watching to share with you something that changed my mind. I've been in the health space for 14 years, best-selling author of 4 books, and there was a health supplement that I was recommending and taking that I no longer believe in, and that is fish oil. I know this might come as a surprise because fish oil has been touted as this anti-inflammatory, but I'm here to tell you, fish oil is actually doing more harm than good. Check this out. It's estimated that 83% of fish oil is rancid on the shelf before you even consume it. Even the best fish oil in the world will go rancid when it is consumed and mixed with your warm body temperature and stomach acids. A study showed that fish oil resulted in 4.5 months of cellular inflammation. Here's the study. It takes 18 weeks to reverse the negative effect of the incorporation of EPA and DHA from fish oil into the cell membrane. This study showed that DHA lowers cardiac mitochondrial activity in your heart. And this study showed in mice that fish oil was linked to cancer. It said, we found that mice developed deadly late-stage colon cancer when given high doses of fish oil. More importantly, with their increased inflammation, it took only 4 weeks for the tumors to develop. So you might be thinking, yeah, but that's high-dose fish oil. According to the National Institutes of Health, the average adult requires 7.2 milligrams of fish oil per day, EPA and DHA. The average capsule of a fish oil has 1,000 milligrams. It's a super physiological overdose, and it creates a lot more problems. So what is the solution? Number 1, eat high-quality fish 1 to 2 times a week. Or number 2, what I do and what I recommend to my students is to take a high-quality plant-based omega like Pureform. I take this every single week. It gives you the derivatives and the building blocks for your body to make its own EPA and DHA. What I love about this company is that it's organic, cold pressed, it's nitrogen infused, so it is preserved. They are a sponsor of this YouTube channel, and they've given you an awesome deal. All you need to do is go to purelifescience.com and use the coupon code BEN4 at checkout to get $4 off your capsules of Pureform. I'm going to drop a link for that with the coupon code in the notes down below. Okay, let's go back to this video. Yeah, absolutely. What about the person who's watching or listening and they're like, but I've been doing keto for 3 weeks now, and I'm barely seeing ketones. You're talking about too much ketones in the beginning. I'm seeing 0.3 sometimes, but I'm doing less than 30 grams of carbs per day. I don't feel that great. They're having a hard time adapting, getting fat adapted. What's going on with that person, and what will you recommend for them to feel better as they make that transition?
Yeah, so, it could be several different things going on. And if you would have asked me a few years ago, I probably would have had a different answer than I do now. But now, just from the current state of keto and the fact that, you can go into a grocery store and you can find, whole shelves full of keto-friendly or, labeled keto-friendly foods. I think that if you actually put these to the test, and if you see like what we do at BioCoach, like we take like all of these products that come on the market and we do blood sugar tests with them to see what the responses are. And we found some pretty crazy things. Like, there's some companies that'll be marketing products as like 3 grams of net carbs that I've seen double my blood sugar. So, when you get people who they think that they're, I'm eating these keto friendly foods, my net carbs are really low, but maybe their total carbs are really high and they're actually nowhere near a state of ketosis because their blood sugar is, getting spiked up to 120, 130 from some of these keto friendly treats. I think that tends to be a big reason why. But there can be a lot of other reasons for it too. If our body is really inflamed, so, maybe you've cut out a lot of processed foods, but you're also consuming a lot of, seed oils and things are pro-inflammatory, then that could be another reason why, these mitochondria are sensitive. There's a lot of different things that affect our mitochondria, and inflammation is one of those things. So, we're not going to be so efficient at utilizing these ketones or producing them if we're in a state of really high inflammation either. So I think that sometimes it comes down to looking at like, there's no hacking keto. Like in my eyes, a ketogenic diet done right is consuming, probably 80 to 90% of your calories from whole foods. Like I think that there is a place for these keto friendly treats because, I think we have to, like, a really important thing with diets, not just about what's optimal. It is about meeting people where they're at. And, if you are, somebody who comes from an Italian family and, you're used to eating pasta every night, like, just going to eating salads or something is like going to be challenging. So like, maybe you reach for like some of these like low carb pastas out there that maybe aren't the most keto friendly, but they're better than the alternative. Like I do think there's a place for that and helping people get to the state of eating, this whole food diet. But if you're, what I think most people are doing now where, 70 to 80% of your calories are coming from these packaged keto friendly foods, I think that's a big reason why people aren't getting into the state of ketosis. And there can be a lot of other, like more metabolic based reasons too. Maybe you're putting your body under a ton of stress. Maybe you're actually eating in a crazy calorie deficit that's like putting your body in this kind of like state of like, wanting to hold on to everything, like not burning very efficiently because of concerns about having enough stored fat and things like that. Those things are possible too. And the easy way to vet that is just to look at your diet. If your diet's looking like what is now like, I would say like the standard American keto diet, then that's probably what's the issue if you're sitting with low ketone levels. But if you're eating a pretty clean diet, then maybe it's just like you need to look at your activity level. You need to look at some of your stressors, your sleep, and things like that. So, but yeah, most times I think it's that we're eating these super hyper palatable, calorie surplus, keto friendly foods, and it's probably not ideal.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. Think about the popularity of keto. That's why these products are all over the place. But
Yeah,
keto friendly does not mean health friendly. There's a big difference,
very true.
usually a huge difference. And also to add to what you just shared, people are also eating pretty much every waking hour they're awake.
Good point.
18 hours out of the day. And that's just, we're not designed to eat so frequently. So think about the meal timing. The better we could get those calories earlier on in the day, and the more time fasting and digesting before bed, the better your numbers are going to look. Something that I just recently read in Dr. Sachin Panda's new book, The Circadian Diabetes Code, he was talking about the dawn effect. A lot of people struggle with high blood sugar levels in the morning. And I've done some things with my students in the past, but one of the things he recommended, and I'm going to experiment with this, he recommended, of course, giving more hours of fasting before bedtime. We know that's going to be beneficial for morning blood glucose, but he also recommends doing exercise after your last meal. So, for example, if you ate at 6 p.m. and you typically have higher blood sugar levels in the morning, this dawn effect, he claims doing like 15, 30 minutes of exercise, it doesn't have to be intense, after your last meal will show lower blood glucose levels in the morning. Have you done any experiments like that?
Yeah, for sure. So that's something that, I think I first picked up on this in college, and it was kind of, it was almost by accident. Like we had a habit in the lab that I worked in where after every meal, we would just go for a walk. And we weren't really doing it for blood sugar levels, or we weren't really doing it like, for anything keto related. It was kind of just it was more of under like the NEAT principle, like trying to get some of that non-exercise induced activity. Yeah. And, we just thought that it made sense. Like, oh, if you get out and walk, at the time, we actually thought maybe it would be better for digestion, but there's maybe some question on whether or not it is good for digestion to get out and walk afterwards. But like we were doing these things, and because we were experimenting so much and measuring blood sugar, we were seeing these reductions in blood sugar. And I didn't think too much about it at the time because, to be honest, this was back in 2016. I was more focused on ketones. I wasn't really thinking about. I only thought about blood sugar in as far as it needs to be low to have your ketones elevated, but I wasn't really focusing on it as like an important individual health marker. And then as I kind of evolved and thought more about these things and started realizing how important it was. And then I think I actually was through talking to Jessie and Chaspe, Glucose Goddess. She talks all about a lot of these different blood sugar hacks, and she was talking about showing some of her studies, her personal studies of going for walks after consuming some higher carb meals, and showing these crazy reductions in blood sugar spikes, like pretty significant. So I definitely think there's something to that. And it's, it's probably coupled with the, there's this idea of we shouldn't eat too late in the evening. And you hear there's so many different camps on this. There's it doesn't matter, as long as the calories are under control. And there's some people that swear that if you eat too late in the day that you're going to store fat. I think that's a pretty nuanced conversation, but I think that if you're like, that's a strategy that I've implemented pretty religiously over the last couple of years where, me and my wife after dinner, we'll go out for a walk, and we have a little kid now and a dog. So we have things that need to be walked anyway. So it's an easy excuse to do it. But it's at least anecdotally, I can say for myself that my fasting blood sugar levels are healthy. And I even do consume carbohydrates in the evening sometimes. Like now, since I've become a little bit more metabolically flexible, I will have like sweet potatoes here and there, or have, some more fruit and things like that. So even despite that, I'm still noticing that my fasting blood sugar is staying in a healthy range. So I think the evening exercise is helping with that.
Yeah. And when you say you have carbohydrates in the evening, you're not necessarily saying you eat carbs and go to bed. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah. Like just with my meal, with dinner.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it'll depend on, what my day of activity has looked like. If I've exercised later in the day, then, I'll usually try to have, something at night, really depending on what phase I'm in. Like, right now I'm actually in a weight gain phase, which is maybe different from, some people's like goals in life. But I actually kind of noticed I got a little bit too light last year, for where I like to be for feeling strong in the gym and playing sports and stuff. So like right now, as I'm trying to gain weight, I'm actually incorporating, more carbohydrates, to help get more calories in and things like that. As summer approaches in spring, when I start to go towards, eating, I really try to focus on eating seasonally. So, when summer rolls around, like I won't eat as many sweet potatoes. Like I'll have some fruit, but it's usually like lower glycemic things. But it's not the only thing that I've ever done in the evening with carbs that I've found to be beneficial is having some blueberries before bed. And I think there is something to some of the neurotransmitter production that you'll get if you have some, but like that's a lot different than consuming a bowl of ice cream before bed, which is what most people are doing when they're consuming carbs. Right. So that, that's just a strategy that I've found work, but yeah, definitely not like consuming a lot and then going straight to bed. I think that, if that is your routine where, maybe you're somebody that's working really late at night and you get home and you got to put the kids down and, you just don't get to eat until 9 o'clock at night. I think finding some way to do something after that is going to be really helpful. And maybe for you, that just looks like you have work around the house to do. Like you need to, walk around and fold laundry, and you need to pick up the house and things like that. Like that can be enough. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and crushing a workout. But if your kind of strategy is to consume a big heavy carb meal before bed, or, and then sit on the couch for a couple hours before bed, probably going to lead to higher glucose levels in the morning. So I think it's definitely worth it to get some level of activity in if you're going to be consuming them later in the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And whenever I eat too close to bed, I'll see my Aura ring scores plummet. My HRV will drop. My body temperature will increase. My resting heart rate will increase. I'll get less deep sleep. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty good where I give myself 3 or 4 hours at the bare minimum of eating before bed.
Yeah.
Of fasting before bed. But sometimes I'll have like a dinner late because somebody's in town, and I'll eat like at 9 p.m., go to bed at 11. And it always, every single time, it impacts my scores negatively.
Does it matter what food for you? Have you noticed, like, is it carbs or, even if you just have protein and fat, do you notice the same thing?
I've done it when I was carnivore, and I still noticed the same thing.
Really?
It's worse when I have more carbs than protein and fat, but I've noticed it even with carnivore meals. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing to know too, because if you're somebody who, regardless of what stage you're in, but let's say you're trying to, be active in the gym and exercise, and you have, weight loss goals or whatever it is, like recovery is so important to that. And a lot of times, that's why people fall off, is that their bodies don't recover very well. They don't feel great the next day. If you're somebody who's forced to go to the gym in the morning, you really have to wake up feeling pretty good to stick with that. You can only grit it out for so long. At some point that motivation fades. Like we really do need to be dependent on feeling pretty good sometimes. And if you're seeing like dips in HRV and all the like deep sleep and everything like that, like you can bet your recovery is not going to be great. And I think that's, that can really harm your ability to stick with some sort of exercise program.
For sure. And if it's happening to me, I imagine it's happening to other people too, even if you're not tracking. So it just makes sense to give yourself a little bit of some digestive time before bed. We're not really designed to eat a whole bunch of food and then go to sleep. It doesn't make sense to give yourself like all this energy and then not really use it, just lie down. And if you think about it, takes a lot of energy to process a meal.
Mm-hmm.
You want to use that energy for all the amazing things that happen during sleep. So it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to kind of have that battle where you're using energy for digestion versus like the lymphatic system and activating your fat burning hormones and letting your heart rate variability do its thing. So it just makes total sense. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, Chris, BioCoach. So BioCoach, I love BioCoach. I have your device here. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing. I know you have a really amazing mission at BioCoach, and you got a great team as well. But what are you guys offering, and how are you bringing this to the masses essentially to make it easier for everybody to check their blood glucose levels?
Yeah, for sure. So, we had, I've been with BioCoach for a little bit over a year now, coming up on about a year and a half. And as you mentioned, the mission, that was definitely what attracted me to it. This mission of really focusing on what I believe is, a core problem with our health, which is metabolic health. And, I think it's a conversation that's starting to be had more, but I don't think that the solutions out there are great yet. I think there's a lot of people who are doing great work in this area, but there's so much with metabolic health. Like metabolic health isn't just diet, it's exercise, it's sleep, it's our stress management, it's the actual micronutrients that we're putting in our body. It's not just about being keto or low carb. There's like so much to it. And that's a big overhaul in somebody's life to be able to do that, right? And so now we're talking to be able to effectively manage our metabolic health. We have to change our behaviors, we have to change our mindset, we have to be able to be consistent, all of these different things. And so at BioCoach, we kind of realized that this was a problem for people, and that a lot of people will, if one of our favorite behavioral models is BJ Fogg. He has a book, Tiny Habits. So sounds like
Great
you've read
book.
it. Yeah. And he talks a lot about how motivation is a very fleeting thing, right? Like a lot of us, and we're at the perfect time to talk about this because we're like 6 weeks out from January. Looking at the statistics, most people fell off their New Year's resolution 4 weeks ago. And the first 2 weeks is when most people fall off. And motivation is fleeting. A lot of people can jump on a diet for 30 days. They can see some progress, but they're really just not able to stick with it, or they just lose that motivation. And it's not a consistent driver. We have to at some point change our behavior and our thoughts around like how we should live our day-to-day lives and how important health is to us. And that's what we're trying to do with BioCoach. So we have the way our company or where our product is set up is we have both hardware and software. So we have a blood sugar, actually have one here. We have our blood glucose and ketone meter, which, we've talked a lot about blood sugar and ketones on this podcast. So, we're measuring these biomarkers that we think are important for metabolic health. Now, I actually don't think that blood sugar is the best marker for metabolic health. I think insulin is actually far better. But in terms of what's accessible and being able to test on a day-to-day basis easily within your life, I think glucose is a good metric to be able to look at. So, we really want to prioritize giving people access to these devices so they can test. But the data is only so important. And this is where I think we've tried to separate ourselves a little bit, is that there's a lot of products out there that will show you your data. You can see your trends over time. And honestly, for somebody like myself, that's great. Like that's all I've ever needed, because I have this baseline understanding of nutrition and I know the different levers I can pull to improve these metrics. But for most people, they don't have that. They don't have a master's degree in nutrition, and that shouldn't be what's required for you to get healthy, right? You should be able to achieve health within your day-to-day life without having to, be a complete expert. So that's where our software comes in with our app. So, all of the data from this device reports to the app where you can see your trends over time, but then we actually try to help you improve these metrics. So, you can join, and, we've taken ideas from other platforms that have done a really good job. Like Duolingo, we think, is an app that does a great job of teaching people things. So, we have like a similar timeline style of feature that's built into our app that walks people through different journeys. So you can join, say a 20-day intermittent fasting quest, or you can join a blood sugar boot camp quest. I think our blood sugar boot camp actually features a lot of content from you in it. So it's, and the idea is that we're teaching people to, like, what are these numbers that we're measuring, what impacts them, and how do we improve them? So, we're trying to provide that educational component. But then the other thing that we also do is we've built gamification into the app as well. It's another thing that platforms like Duolingo have done well. Actually, one of the big platforms that we looked at for this was Candy Crush, because,
addictive.
Exactly. And that's what we thought, is we were like, people are very addicted to this platform. like, wouldn't it be great if they were, addicted to a platform that was making them healthier? Like that would be the ideal situation. That's going to be how you change somebody's behavior. So, we've built in some different gamification strategies where, you can win prizes for, completing the tasks in the app. And we're actually so right now we launched our first version. Our first version that we launched to the public. It's been, probably iteration number, God knows how many. But we launched that back in October, and we've, used feedback from our users the last 3 or 4 months. And now we've brought that back to development, and we're working on the next version of the app that's going to have more robust gamification built in, more robust education system, better UX, things that people were giving us feedback on that we've made improvements on. So, we're really excited about it because we think we've already seen some incredible things. Like, we've gotten stories from people who, one of the other products that we sell is we have an at-home A1C test kit, which is a great marker. It's a 3-month average of your blood sugar. So it's a great marker to track your progress over time. So, we'll have people that will get the kit. You get 4 tests with the kit. So they'll test at the beginning of BioCoach. And, a lot of those people that have started in October, we're now starting to get that next test from them. And we're seeing these crazy, people literally going from being in diabetic ranges and now they've lowered it down to pre-diabetic, or people that were in pre-diabetic ranges and getting down to, being normal or at least, in a more healthier range. So, we're really excited about it because we think that it's something that if we're able to do this mission how we intend to do it, which, we have some different strategic partnerships that we're working on that will allow us to get access to bigger audiences and make more impact. We think that we can really, move the needle in this mission of improving metabolic health. And, for us, we think that that's, it's the most important thing. It's not just, it's so widespread, this impact. Metabolic health it's how you and I feel on a day-to-day basis, which affects our interactions with the people that we are a part of. It affects the work and the missions that we're on as individuals. It affects our economy. It affects like how much money we're spending is for, things like type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes is crazy. So we think that the impact can be pretty widespread. So it's a mission that we just, every day we wake up, and it's really fun to be, part of a group that's so motivated for something like this. Like, the individuals, in the company are, everybody's coming together, and like, it's crazy. You'll see, late at night, people are hopping on and working. Like, we have no expectation to do that sort of thing. We have very flexible work hours, but people are just so passionate about the mission. Which is a blessing for me. Like, the amount of fulfillment, that I can get out of working with passionate people on a passionate mission, I think is pretty wild. So, it's we have a long way to go, I think, on this mission. One of the other things that we're focusing on with our product is, it's a subscription service. So, depending on how long you sign up for, it ranges from $25 to $35. And, we have built into our subscription, you get unlimited glucose strips as a part of it. So, that was a pain point that we got from talking to diabetics who were kind of sick of the cost of testing their blood sugar so frequently. So, that's something that we put into it. Through the gamification that we're working on, you can actually earn rewards that can get your cost of membership down to 0. And that the cost, that cost component was important to us, because if you look at the populations most affected by metabolic based disease, they tend to be lower income populations. And, we didn't want our solution to be something that you either have to have great insurance for, or you have to be able to pay a lot of money out of pocket for. Like, we wanted it to be something that ideally, if you do it right, it can be free. But at the most, it can be, $25 to $30 a month, which even for some people, like, we're going to be continually trying to improve on that, because even for some individuals, that's too much, right? So we don't want cost to be a reason why somebody can't get healthy. And that's why we've kind of structured our subscription the way that it is. So, long way to go on the journey, but I think that we're making a lot of progress so far.
Yeah, I love the mission, first and foremost. It's a very important mission. Diabetes is, as you know, Chris, it's near and dear to my heart. My dad died from the complications of diabetes in 2014. And the truth is this: most people don't even die from diabetes. They die from the complications of it, the degeneration of that disease, the kidney diseases, the heart attacks, the strokes, the amputations, the infections. It's what it leads to. But diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is very, I'm not going to use the word easy, but if you put in the work, there's a high probability that you could reverse it within a year, right? If you put in the work. And having an A1C meter and a glucose meter, and then having coaching and support and gamification is kind of like everything you need to make sure you're staying consistent. So you do it long enough for it to actually matter. So your team at Coach has been growing. I'm looking at the page now, and it's more people than when I last looked
Yeah.
at. But you have a lot of wonderful people on the team, really smart advisors, and people that I have really looked up to and studied as well. And you mentioned some of the testing that you've done and seen. I think you said one of the net carbs, 3 net carbs, like doubled glucose. I think, was that Logan Delgado who tested that? Because I saw a lot of his TikToks doing those tests.
Yeah, so that one was actually me.
Oh, it was you.
Logan,
Okay.
yeah, Logan is our star content creator, so we let him do a lot of those videos. But I mean, he's tested everything. Like, we listen to, like, whenever we post a video, we'll end up getting people to be like, "Oh, go test this." Like, we want you to test, Fairlife protein, or that was the one we most recently did, or we want you to test Diet Coke or something. So Logan's been our test dummy. It's funny because our content manager and social media manager, she'll, like, every once in a while she'll hit me up with a long list of things that she wants to test, and I'll always, like, ask her, like, "Are you trying to kill me? Like, I gotta go." The other day she was trying to send me on, like, a fast food spree to go eat a bunch of fast food and test my blood sugar, and I'm like, I gotta be honest,
Is it worth it?
I don't know. I don't know if I got it in me, but Logan takes one for the team, and he does a great job. And we've had to work on that messaging a little bit too, because the important thing about testing your blood sugar and your response is that it is different for everybody. Like, I've noticed, and this is why testing is so important. Like, I've noticed in the past where, I've had friends that have all been testing at the same time, and you'll see wildly different responses on the same foods for different individuals. Like, sweet potatoes was one that I was blown away, where, like, when I consume sweet potatoes, I get a very low spike. It actually stays, not too far off from, like, a low glycemic berry. Whereas, like, some people, I've seen it spike, to 150 after. So, it really, like, whenever we put these videos out, we always try to say that, like, because we'll get pushback sometimes with people being like, "Yeah, but Logan's in great shape and everything," and we're like, "Yeah, totally. Like, that's why we have a subscription where you can test for yourself, because that's what matters." But I think it is important for people to, the testing piece is really important to me, because it allows you to see when you can actually, sometimes we have a slow feedback on how we feel from food, right? Like, sometimes food might make us feel tired, or maybe it upsets our stomach, but it's not always the most rapid feedback that allows us to really understand if a food is good for us or not. And I think when we test our blood sugar, we can get that feedback right away that can tell us, like, if your goal is to control your blood sugar and this food is spiking it by 60 points and it's staying elevated for, 3 hours after you eat it, probably not the right food for you to be eating if your goal is indeed controlling that blood sugar. So, we think that that's a good part of the behavior change as well, as people being able to actually see in real time what the impact that's having on their metabolic health.
Yeah, it's so important. And you mentioned how, and I agree with you, you mentioned that testing your insulin arguably is more important.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, testing insulin is just not as readily available. But, with a finger prick blood glucose, testing your postprandial glucose is very giving you an accurate assessment of how well your insulin is doing at processing that meal. So it's not directly an insulin test, but it's indirectly showing you what your insulin numbers are, how your beta cells are doing at processing that meal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, like you said, insulin is, it's hard to come by. Like, if you want to get it done, sometimes you have to pay out of pocket. There are some at-home test kits, but not super clear on the accuracy of those yet at this point. So, I
those
think
at-home test kits, do they give you a result immediately, or do you have to send it in and get a result?
You have to send it in. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
At least the ones that I've seen so far have all been, kind of like there's a lot of different testing kit companies out there, but yeah, so you have to send it in to get a result. And, I'm a little bit unsure if you're providing enough blood or enough of a sample, and, then you're sending it in the mail. Like, I don't know for sure. So I do think that that's, agreed with you that postprandial is a really good look at it, because, if you're consuming something and you see a spike, it's not even necessarily the spike that matters the most. Like, in my eyes, it really is I actually think it's really interesting the way that we do gestational diabetes testing, that we just look at the spike. Because, when we do like gestational diabetes testing, we give them like 80 to 100 grams of sugar. And then if they fail that, based off of how high it spikes, we like make them go in for another test. But it's like, well, under what circumstances do we think that 80 to 100 grams of sugar wouldn't have spiked their blood sugar, right?
Right.
What matters more, and what is a better sign of insulin resistance and things is whether or not that can come back down to baseline in a relatively quick fashion. So yeah,
Right.
that's a great point, that if you don't have access to or the means of getting an insulin test done, looking at postprandial glucose is almost just as good.
And the goal would be to get your let's say you're fasting, you test your blood glucose with a BioCoach device, it's 88, and then you have a meal, and then an hour later it goes up to like 118.
Mhm.
Then 2 hours later it should be closer to the baseline number, the 88. So 2 hours after eating postprandial, you wanted to get as closely as possible to that baseline number, and that's a good sign that your pancreas did a good job at producing insulin and driving it back down. Would you agree with that assessment?
Totally. Yep. I think that's the best thing is like, yeah, you definitely want to see that peak should be, ideal. Like, and again, peak's not the most important, but ideally you're looking around like the hour, maybe to, 45 to 75 minutes probably is where you're looking at the peak. And then you hope by 2 hours that you're back down. And that's, again, there's probably some individuality to that. Like if it comes back down at 2.5 hours, like, probably not a reason to panic or anything like that. But most people who are dealing with insulin resistance will see that, actually never comes back down because, it's still 3-4 hours later, it's still elevated, and then they consume their next meal and they further bump it up. So yeah, I think once you start getting 3+ hours of it not being back to baseline, that's a pretty good sign that you have something going on with your metabolism.
Yeah. And if you're wondering how to get or learn more about BioCoach, the website is biocoach.io. And we'll drop a link down below. They have some information on there. They have their membership prices and all the things that they offer. So you can check that out down below. I have 2 more questions for you. You got time for 2 more questions?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
What does your supplement rotation look like currently?
Ooh, great question. It's a lot lighter than it used to be. When I first started getting into health, I used to be like, taking everything, like wanted
Yeah,
to,
same.
it's like any ingredient that had an interesting study behind it that showed improvement. I'm like, let me try it. And then I started realizing like 80/20, like there's a few supplements that really move the needle the most. So for me, it's I don't really do pre-workouts as much anymore. Like before I work out, I do like to have a little bit of caffeine before, but I'll just do that by way of a little bit of black coffee before I train. And I do creatine beforehand. So creatine is actually the supplement that I've been biggest on incorporating back. And I started incorporating it back about a year ago, mostly for like having better joint health, making some strength gains, and improving body composition, and then really started looking into the research on brain health and found some really fascinating stuff. Like on top of there's a lot of a fair amount of research looking at some short-term boosts in cognitive function, some improvements in memory over time, maybe some reduction in some markers of neurodegeneration. But the one that really stood out to me, because I was becoming a new dad at the time, was that some studies showing improved cognitive function when sleep deprived from creatine was the specific one. And so that's, to me, and there's just so many benefits to creatine that I've found no reason to stop taking it. So I typically do anywhere between 5 and 10 grams a day. If I'm training really hard, I'll do 5 grams before and 5 grams after. After a workout, I'll do that with some sort of protein. Lately, it's been beef protein. I'm trying not to do too much dairy in my diet, so I'll usually go for beef. And good tasting beef protein is hard to come by. Equip Foods is the one that I've been a big fan of. It's Dr. Gustin's brand, so he introduced me to it, and it's very clean. It's 3 ingredients, so I'll take that. And then outside of that, I have a couple of ingredients that I'll take for like cognitive function. So I'm a really big fan of alpha GPC. So I'll do I've been doing alpha GPC and caffeine, whenever I work for years. It's been a combo that's I've really been a big fan of. So typically I would do that with a capsule, but recently I've actually started taking Keto Brains because they made a nootropic powder that's like, it's alpha GPC, L-theanine, and lion's mane, which were 3 ingredients that I really liked taking anyway. And it's in a creamer that I think they have C8 MCT oil powder with it, so it mixes very easily into coffee. So I'll use that supplement before, if I'm going into like a deep work session or something like that. And that's really it. I'm not really doing much else besides I'll use some exogenous ketones strategically. if I'm, trying to get like a big boost in ketones for some specific reason, I'll use them, but definitely not as routine. But as far as like what I'm taking every day, that's really about it. It's, creatine, alpha GPC, and protein. And that's really about it.
Well, that's fascinating. That's interesting. So Keto Brains, who owns Keto Brains? Do you know who owns
Yeah,
it?
so it's Kyle and Molly Rucker. They are siblings, and I just had them on my podcast too because they're really just, and they actually, Kyle was at, and maybe Molly too, was at Metabolic Health Summit last year in Santa Barbara. So, or I guess you weren't there. I was thinking you were there, but I don't think you were at that event, were
No,
you?
we won the award though for Podcast of the Year,
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say I knew that, so I was
but I
thinking you
wasn't
were there,
there.
but yeah. So yeah, I had met Kyle there, and they just have a really interesting mission. Like, Molly has a pretty great background in nutrition, and she was making this kind of formula herself for a long time, and she was giving it to some friends and some clients, and then they decided to make a product around it. But it's dosed really well. Like if you look at like the efficacious dose for theanine and for alpha GPC and lion's mane, it's really checking the boxes there. So, which is rare, in the supplement space now. Whenever you look
Yeah.
at most like prop blend, and it's not a proprietary blend. Most times when we're looking at like a finished product that has several ingredients, the ones that really move the needle are never dosed appropriately because they're expensive, and everybody's trying to cut corners. So they've done a really good job of making it the right doses to experience the benefits.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm looking them up here. I'm gonna try them out myself. How's the taste? Is it flavored at all?
No, it doesn't really have a flavor. They use like I think there's coconut milk powder in it as well, so there's a little bit of like a coconut cream kind of taste to it. When you mix it in coffee, I'd say it's kind of the equivalent of putting heavy cream in your coffee. I actually will
Oh,
put it a little
that's
bit more
great.
commonly in like a protein shake because like I'll train in the morning, and then like when I'm transitioning from like post exercise to work, I'll just throw a scoop in that protein shake because it's kind of teasing me up for the work day. And when you put it with like a chocolate protein shake, it really doesn't taste much, but it does have a nice taste when you put it with coffee.
Okay, I'm gonna give them a shot, and maybe I'll ask you to connect me with them if I if I like the product. So cool.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Are you taking magnesium or no?
Yeah. Oh, so I did forget electrolytes. So that's the
Okay.
other one. So big electrolyte user, especially living in Florida, and I'm a sweater.
Yeah.
So I definitely need. So the two that I use, and I use them based on the case of what I'm doing. I use either LMNT or Element, and Perfect Keto. So the Element one's a lot higher in sodium, so I'll do that after a sauna session or after playing basketball,
Yeah.
or if I just feel like I'm really depleted, like if I've had a day where I just haven't drank much water and kind of been sweating consistently, I'll take that. And then the Perfect Keto one, I actually formulated that for them when I was working for them a couple of years ago. So I formulated that to kind of be like the what I believe is the right ratio of each electrolyte, magnesium, sodium, potassium, to impact the absorption of each of those, because they each one of them can have an impact on the absorption of the other. So I take that just about every day because it's I was able to formulate it to be exactly what I wanted anyway, so it's kind of is
Nice.
perfect for me. So that's I haven't taken, it's been a little while since I've taken a magnesium specific supplement. Like I usually am getting it in the context um of a full electrolyte supplement, but in the past I've been a really big fan of taking magnesium threonate before bed.
Mhm.
That's been something that I've used, but I've kind of gotten away from it. And as you say it, I'm kind of thinking maybe I need to jump back on it. I think it's kind of slipped my mind, to be honest.
I like the stack. I like the stack. So thanks for sharing that. So creatine, beef protein, alpha GPC with caffeine. You've been switching over to keto brains, and then electrolytes to kind of cover your bases there. It's a good stack. Final question is around a supplement that we didn't mention that I call vitamin G, gratitude. What are you grateful for, Chris?
Oh man, great question. I think the two, I can say two things, and one of them is what I just alluded to. Like, I'm very grateful in this, the state of the world and everything, to be working for a company that's on a great mission. Being able to wake up and feel fulfilled in the type of work that I'm doing, and work, like I mentioned, with like really passionate people, is something that I know not everybody's fortunate enough to get to do. To actually enjoy like your work, I think is a blessing, to not feel like you're working. to have to work hard to do what you do, but to be able to enjoy it, I think is a rare thing. So I always try to remember how grateful I am for that, even in the stressful moments where, I'm up late working and stuff like that. And then family, like it's cliche, but I have a 17-month-old child, a son, and getting to experience like the world through the eyes of a kid is really an incredible experience. You start to, when you experience them experiencing things for the first time, it completely changes your outlook on life. It makes you slow down a little bit. It makes you appreciate your surroundings, things that you've been taking for granted. Living in a state like Florida, that's a beautiful state, and sometimes you become numb to its beauty. And then, with a kid, you get reminded frequently of how awesome, some of the things are around you. So I'm so grateful for that, because it's, amongst all of the stress of work and, everything that's going on in the world, being able to have, a solid family and with my wife and my child to come back to, and take peace in that every single night is really a blessing. So those are the two things that I'm most grateful for.
Yeah, those are amazing blessings. I love that. To live on purpose with your purpose. I mean, that is unfortunately not common. Most
Yeah.
people are doing things they hate to do and they're unhappy, and that makes you unhealthy. So I love that you're doing things you love to do. And it's so, uh, what an honor to have a family, to have a beautiful young child, and then your wife. And you live in Florida. So many blessings.
Yeah.
I love it, Chris. Your website is www.theketologist.com, and then your Instagram is the same thing, at the Ketologist. Share your podcast and anywhere else you'd like for my audience to check you out.
Yeah, for sure. So my website is in desperate need of a facelift. It's taken a back seat to all the BioCoach efforts lately. So it's not maybe the best resource right now, but Instagram is the primary one where I put out a lot of my content. And then the podcast and newsletter is both Thinking Health. So I have the Thinking Health podcast that you can find on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of the platforms. And then the Thinking Health newsletter is on Substack, and that's just a free newsletter that I do centered around kind of like health philosophy. So it's really looking at these different minds. It kind of stemmed from, the last couple of years, I developed a passion for Stoicism, and I've kind of realized that there was a lot of great Stoic principles that can be kind of downloaded into your like thoughts and behaviors that can impact, your relationship with health and your ability to stick to different health plans. So that newsletter is, typically trying to take, different areas of expertise and relating them back to health and giving you framework and a mindset to adopt healthy principles and stick with them. So it's really a passion project for me too, because I love writing so much. And it's something that I get to invest. It's like getting to do some deep work thinking through these complex things, and then trying to get it out of my brain into a place where people can read it is a fun thing. So those are the two spots for that.
Very cool. We're going to drop links for that down below. Go follow Chris and all the wonderful things he's doing. And then if you see him at KetoCon, look for a tall guy, 6'3", maybe hanging out with me, and come say hello to us. We would love to see you there.
Yeah.
Chris, I appreciate you, man. I love what you're doing. I'm always inspired by you. You're just a genuine, awesome human being. So thank you for coming back to the show and doing round 2 with me. I look forward to more collaborations and doing some more things with BioCoach as well. So I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Ben. It's always great to talk to you, and likewise, I always feel inspired after getting to talk to you and hear about all the awesome things that you're doing. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, brother.